Welcome to Danville Community College. We're very pleased to have all of you here this morning. Certainly on a nasty day like this, certainly we admire you for coming out and being here with us. I'm Dr. Chris Rizel, the academic vice president, and we are certainly glad to see you. Well, on behalf of DCC, Piedmont Community College, the Danville Public Schools, and also Averett University, we'd like to thank the Danville Regional Foundation and the Danville, Pennsylvania County Chamber of Commerce. And today's speaker event is sponsored by those groups. And today, this morning, we have with us Dr. Tim Wilson. He is a Cheryl J. Aston Professor of Psychology at the University of Virginia. And today he's going to talk with us about this year's Community Read. It's his book, a copy of it right here. It's called Redirect, the Surprising New Science of Psychological Change. And certainly we look forward to his comments on this. It's an important one today, important message for us. We're going to hear his thoughts on the changes that are taking place here in Danville and Pennsylvania County and throughout this whole region. Looking at entrepreneurship, also talking about the role of advances in technology, and also taking a look at how important it is for us to continue our tradition of caring about each other and trying to take care of one another. So it's an important message for us, and I think you'll enjoy it and appreciate it today. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And let me thank you as well for coming out on this dreary morning, but a little nicer here than it is further north, so our thoughts are with those folks up there as well. Well, I'm a psychologist, and I thought I'd begin with seeing if you know what that means. When you hear that someone's a psychologist, what do you think about? What do I do? Yeah, analyze your mind, treat patients. Well, maybe like Dr. Phil. Everyone ever seen Dr. Phil on TV? I am not Dr. Phil. I thought I'd just begin with telling you a little bit about what I do, because there are different kinds of psychologists. And the Dr. Phil type are those who are trained to do psychotherapy. They see patients, people who are in need of help for depression or all sorts of problems. And that's a really important kind of psychologist, and it takes a special kind of person to do it, I think. But that doesn't happen to be my profession. I am a different kind of psychologist, what we call research psychologists. Sometimes we think there ought to be another name for what we do, like behavioral scientists, something like that. I don't do therapy, I do research. I do experiments where we try to figure out how the mind works, what helps people more broadly by doing studies where we try out things, see if they help people or not, and then recommend interventions or programs. So I want to tell you today a little bit about the findings from some of that research that's talked about in my book, but I'll try to boil it down to some lessons I hope that you find useful. So, okay, here's another question for you. What makes someone your age successful? So someone who is actually going to really succeed. Define success however you want, educational or just a well-rounded, happy person, but what sort of things are actually going to determine who succeeds and who doesn't? What was that? Set goals, okay. Mm-hmm. Good. Anybody else? Optimism, good. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Money can be important. I'm sorry? A positive attitude? Well, some of you are stealing my talk, so hold on here. But yeah, I think there are some common answers to this. And I think one answer that I think we often think about is that some people have certain kinds of talents and others don't. So stuff you're born with, maybe, and this doesn't just apply to academics, of course, but think of musical ability or athletic talent. Some of us have more of it than others. That's one common theory. So you got it or you don't. Another approach is that some of us have more advantages than others. So money, for example, that some of us are born in the circumstances that give us advantages that other people don't have. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you those aren't true, but I want to suggest they're not the full story. And that in fact, okay, maybe certainly there is inborn talent. I will never be an NBA basketball player, but even in my youth. But you know, there's a lot more to what we're born with, and there's a lot more to advantages. And so what else is there? Some of you have alluded to it. Namely, the kinds of stories we tell ourselves, the kind of narratives we develop. We all have stories about who we are, what our abilities are, what our goals are, what's going to happen to us in the future. And these stories really matter, I think. Some of it has to do with optimism. Some people's stories are that I have a bright future. Others of us think, you know, maybe not so much. And so, you know, let's maybe make this a little more down to home. So let's just imagine two students, maybe at your school. And they both are doing about the same in school. But they have very different attitudes or stories, if you will. Student number one says, you know, I don't think I have much of a future because times are tough. Economically, times are tough. My school funding keeps dropping. You know, things just aren't going that well. Student number two is more of an optimist and says, yeah, you know, yes, it's true, times are tough, but someone's got to succeed, so why not me? I think I can do it if I try. Now, the thing about these stories is, notice that I haven't told you which story is right or wrong, because I don't think that's what really matters, is not the right or wrongness of those stories, but more what they lead to. That the person with the more optimistic story is the one who's going to try harder, and particularly when things get a little rough. So let's say both these students encounter a bump in the road. Maybe they're taking a difficult class. Maybe they're a musician, but you know they don't make an ensemble in school or whatever. And how are they going to react? Well, the pessimist is going to give up and say, yeah, you know, this proves it that I don't have what it takes. Whereas the optimist is going to try harder and see what else he or she can do to overcome them. So a lot of research in psychology has begun to address how we can change those stories. Could we take that pessimist and turn him or her into more of an optimist? And it's not always easy, but I think there are programs and writing techniques and things we can do to change our attitude, basically, which I'll give you some examples. So let me flesh out a little bit about what a good story is. I think the research shows, because optimism's a part of it, but it's not the only part. And again, on optimism, you know, it's not enough just to be optimistic. Some of you may have heard of some of these self-help books, like The Secret. Anybody ever heard of this book? Well, okay, good. Don't buy it. It's a self-help book which basically says that to succeed in life, all we have to do is think positive thoughts. So if I want to be a success, say I want to go to a really good college, I just have to sort of think that and it'll come true, as long as I think positive thoughts. Well, you know, that's a kind of optimism, but I think I actually mean a somewhat different kind of optimism, thinking about what our capabilities are and then thinking about what we have to do to actually get there and be optimistic, particularly when times get rough and you encounter a bump in the road. The true optimist goes over that bump or finds a way around it rather than turning around and going home. So optimism is good in that sense. Having a sense of purpose. I don't think this is going to come as that much of a surprise to you that's part of a good story. Goals to work for. I think someone mentioned that actually as part of what it means to have a good attitude, is to set goals for yourself and work hard towards them. Finding something you love to do. So having a purpose in the sense of finding some activity that you really, really enjoy. Now, I remember what it was like at your age. Maybe not always that clearly, but I know when I was around that age, I really didn't know what I was interested in. I didn't have that many passions. Sure, I like some things. I like sports. I like some of my classes in school. But I think just finding something that you really enjoy is really important. Okay, here's one that maybe isn't quite as obvious. How we view our own abilities is a really important part of our story. So a common view is that, let's take, well, again, you can use academics, athletics, music, art, whatever you want. But let's take academics. And there's one view of what it means to succeed, as I said before, is that we're born with a certain amount of ability and talent. And that's what we either have it or we don't. Now, the problem with that theory is that when we do encounter a bump in the road, as we all do, we all struggle at times. If we believe that our success is based on what we're born with, what's a logical conclusion if we don't do well? I must not have it. I guess I don't have that ability, so I might as well give up. Same in athletics. If you really want to be a talented athlete and you think it's all a matter of just skill, when you struggle and don't do well, the logical assumption is you don't have that skill, so you might as well switch to joining the band or something. There's a different theory that I think is actually more accurate, and that is that, again, of course, talent matters, but not nearly as much as we think in the sense of something we're born with. Rather, it's something we work on and develop. Talent is better thought of as a muscle that gets stronger with exercise. And if we don't exercise it, it's going to wither. But if we really try and exercise it, it will do well. There's lots of famous examples of that. This one's old. I assume most of you know who Michael Jordan was. North Carolina guy, went on to be, some people think, the best basketball player in the world who ever lived. Some dispute, but some people think that. When you see someone with that amount of success, again, I think our natural assumption is that he was born with something I'll never have. Well, maybe a certain amount of truth to that in Michael Jordan's case. But what a lot of people don't know about him is that he was this scrawny kid who was cut from his basketball team in high school. He was only in 9th grade, but still he was convinced that he was going to make it, and he was cut. Now, if he had the theory that it's all about ability, he would have switched to soccer or something. Thankfully for the basketball world, he didn't, and partly because of his mother, who told him, well, okay, what are you going to do about it? You were cut from your team. What are you going to do about it? He went to school an hour early every day to the gym and practiced, and, well, the rest is history. He eventually went to the University of North Carolina and then to the MBA. Now, obviously, we're not all going to get to the MBA. But that's not really the point. The point is that whatever our talent, we can grow it. And I'm often reminded of a friend of mine from high school, a guy named Ed, who desperately wanted to be a good football player. He just really, really wanted to be a star. And he worked and he worked, and he and I were both on our high school football team. And I must say he worked a lot more than I did and had more success than I did. He managed to play in college. He went to a very small college and managed to play there. And did he make the NFL? No, he didn't have enough gifts to do that. But what he did do is work so hard he became a college football coach and had quite a bit of success at that. And I think that was 95% perspiration and 5% talent in his case. All right, this is all well and good, but how do we get these good stories about ourselves? If you're the pessimist, how do you become an optimist? And I don't have any magic tricks where I can wave a wand and get you there, but there are a few things I think that can help. One is a principle that we psychologists like to talk about that we call do good, be good. Now, by that I mean that if we want to change the way we view ourselves, interestingly, ironically, it's often best to change our behavior first. Don't just sit in our armchairs trying to change our story, but actually go out and change what you do. Because that can actually, then our stories follow from that. So if you're feeling disengaged, get engaged. Do some volunteer work. You're not sure what your passion is? Try stuff out. Do internships, volunteer. Find someone who is doing something you like or think you might like, and join them. What else can we do? Well, in terms of, we think of these stories as things inside our heads, and they are, but they also grow in a social context. Namely, in the people we hang out with often share stories. The stories of our group are as important as the stories of us as individuals, I think. And again, I think particularly people at your age, you can only take so much, I assume, of hearing someone like me stand up and lecture at you about this. Often it's your peers that matter more than anything else. And so there's a lesson here, is hang out with other people with good stories. As simple as that sounds, I think that there is a power to the group, and having people who think highly of themselves and have good stories, hang out with those folks, and that can be a good thing too. Well, what about back to optimism for a minute? Is it possible to become an optimist if we're not? Again, no magic wands here, but I think there are some things we can do to help. So one is, there are some writing exercises that psychologists have developed that might help. Now, I bet you didn't know I was going to give you homework, huh? Well, you don't have to hand it in, okay? It's not mandatory, but think about trying this on your own if you want. One is called the best possible selves writing exercise. And what you do is simply, maybe in the evening before you go to bed, take out some paper, and for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 3 or 4 nights in a row, I'll read you some instructions that have been used here. It's, think about your life in the future and imagine that everything has gone as well as it possibly could. You have worked hard and succeeded at accomplishing all of your life goals. How did you get there? What did you do to accomplish this? Just this simple little exercise of fleshing out who you might be in the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, imagining it, and not just imagining it, but imagining how you got there, what you had to do to accomplish it, how you worked hard to accomplish it, can be a valuable exercise just to give us something to work for. Okay, here's another one. It's called self-affirmation. And the way it works is, I'm going to read a list of things that people might value in life. And when I read these, think of a couple of them, maybe 3 that you think apply to you the most. Okay, so we'll start there. Here's my list. Athletic ability, being good at art, getting good grades, creativity, independence, membership in a social group, such as your community or at school, music, politics, relationship with friends and family, religious values, sense of humor. Well, ideally, everyone could find a couple of those that you care about. And then the way this writing exercise works is that you would spend a few minutes writing about why that particular value matters to you, why it's important. So let's say you chose relationships with friends or family. That's a pretty common one for people. Just think about why and why that's important to you. Just that little writing exercise has been shown in some good studies to help people in academics and other domains. And it's an interesting one because I don't think it's obvious why it works. I think what it does is thinking of ourselves broadly as people who really care about some things and more than one thing, it takes the heat off when thing goes wrong in one of those domains. So if I'm struggling in school, say, and I've just done this writing exercise where I've reminded myself that, well, school isn't really important to me, but so is music. That just lowers the temperature a little bit, makes me freak out a little less about having gotten a bad grade on my chemistry test or whatever, and makes it easier to kind of be clear-headed and work harder for that goal, just by reminding ourselves that we're well-rounded people with things we really care about. Okay, one last writing exercise, and this one applies if something bad happens in our life. We stumble, some kind of traumatic event. Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you, if it's a serious thing, get help. I mean, talk to your parents, talk to your teachers, talk to counselors. There's resources out there. But if it's something that, in the order that we all experience every now and then, maybe an academic setback, maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend just broke up with you, something that's painful, then, let a little time go by, see if you've bounced back. But if you haven't, try this writing exercise where you just take out a piece of paper again and write about your deepest feelings about this event. Maybe 3 or 4 times again in the evening, why you feel that way. And a particular interesting approach is to do so in kind of a third person, as if you were somebody else looking at your life and your situation, to try to get a little objectivity about it. Say, okay, my girlfriend dumped me a month ago, still feeling pretty bad about it. But now I'm going to kind of step back and look at it through the eyes of somebody else even, and really try to understand what it means to me, what my feelings are about it, how I might get over it. And that little writing exercise gives us a little more objectivity, often allows us to find a little more meaning in the event in a way that we can move on and find a new girlfriend or whatever. Okay, so let me just sum up that there's 3 words I've invented to try to summarize everything I've said, a little motto, and that is persist, believe, and achieve. Persist. Work hard at it. Again, I'm sure this isn't new to you to have someone tell you that hard work pays off. You got to persist. And the more we do that, the more we believe in ourselves. The more we have some success, we work hard and things go better. We can believe we can do it. And believe is meant to capture having goals for our future, believing in ourselves. And then achieve, the more we achieve, it's kind of a circular thing. The more we achieve, the more we can persist, the more we believe in ourselves. Okay, I will stop there and happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay.
Anybody have any questions for Dr. Wilson?
Yeah.
What do you think about art therapy programs?
Art therapy programs. Well, I'm no expert on them, but are they? I guess it depends what they're being used for. So are they a cure for serious mental illness? I don't think so. But are they useful for capturing some of the things I've been talking about? If they engage people and give them some sense of purpose and skill, then sure, I guess so. Yeah.
So one of the things you talk about in Redirect is the need for a scientific experiment on certain programs. So how do you balance that need for an effective experiment with the program that needs to be instituted immediately?
That's a really good question. Thank you. So you've actually read the book. Thank you. This is something that in my household we talk about a lot, because it just so happens my wife is an elected official in Charlottesville. She's a city council member. So she's got people coming to her, we need solutions right now to these problems. That you're right, there's a pressure there we got to find out if it works. I think partly that's the job of my profession, to be testing things all the time. To get researchers to constantly be trying things so that you can go to a shelf and pick off a program that works. But if there isn't a program that's developed, then I think it's possible to implement and test at the same time. The only thing, I'll give you a specific example. So in Charlottesville, as in most communities, we have a Boys and Girls Club. And they started a summer program to try to help the dip in achievement that often happens over the summer when kids are out of school. They took at-risk kids, gave them a summer program, and found that their test scores seemed not to have dropped. And I am a little bit of a professional skeptic, because if you know anything about experimental design, that's good, but there wasn't a control group. There wasn't a group of kids who didn't get the program. So we can't be absolutely sure that the success was due to the program or something else. So in that case, there's some tough choices. Now, it would be simple if there were more people who wanted to do the program than they had spots, because then you randomly select from them and you have a natural control group. You track the kids who got in, you track the kids who did not get in. But what if there aren't enough kids? Then you have a tough choice. Do I leave some untreated as my control group and do the actual study? And that means some kids may not get the benefit from this. Yeah, as you know from my book, I tend to be pretty hardcore about this. I do think we need those control groups because it's the only way we'll find out if things work. And unfortunately, we found out that some programs backfire and do more harm than good, and we need to know that. So always have that control group, even if you're implementing something right away. Yeah?
Those exercises that you gave from being pessimistic to an optimistic, what would you recommend for someone who's not a writer, say like an artist, a visual artist?
Well, great question too. And there's a little bit of evidence that any kind of expressivity, creativity can help. But I'm a little hesitant to recommend that too strongly because there's not a lot of research on it. But I think the key is, does it help us find meaning in our lives? And does it allow us to sort of restructure our thoughts about ourselves in ways that make us optimistic, give us a sense of a future? If that can be done expressively in a nonverbal medium, fantastic. Now, it doesn't literally have to be writing. It can be talking into a tape recorder. So, one doesn't need a lot of writing skills to do these exercises. Yeah.
You talk about music as a part of therapy.
The question is about how does music play into this? Well, I was talking to someone this morning about that, and I do think music is really important for training our brains, and I think that all kids should be exposed to music. It's wonderful not just in and of itself, but as a way to help our brains organize material. I think it generalizes to other areas. But if your question is more about, say, in adulthood with music therapy, again, I'm just not an expert on that to know.
I was just talking in general.
Okay, yeah, no, I think the ability to read music, to play music, has a lot of benefits. Yeah.
How does the statistical analysis, when you do some of your experiments, really and truly effectively rule out important factors like socioeconomic status, educational background, home life, and so you can make conclusions based on just the program's effectiveness?
Well, another great question. Thank you. And it's tough, but there is a magical thing called random assignment that does wonders. And so I'll go back to my example of whether the Boys and Girls Club program was helping these kids. Say we took two groups of kids and we put some in that program and some in a control group that didn't do the program. And then we wanted to compare how they did academically. You're exactly right that we'd have to be concerned with all sorts of reasons why one group might do well and one group might not. Maybe one group comes from higher socioeconomic homes, or maybe one group has more music training, or one group, and they could differ in any sorts of ways. And the way around that is by randomly assigning them. So if we just flip a coin, and so you go into one group and someone else goes into another one, and the groups are relatively large, then just by chance, things are going to equal out. So there'll be as many musicians in one group as the other, as many people from different economic backgrounds in one group or the other. So it's not always easy to accomplish that, but you got to have that randomness so that you equalize all those background factors. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Redirect, when we talk about parenting, you said if you want your kids to be good, that you should try to push them into certain types of groups like sports or like volunteer work such as that. But how do you balance pushing them into something that will be good for them versus what they want to do? Like maybe they don't want to do sports, you said, or become involved in a group.
Another great question. So how do we channel our kids into activities that might be beneficial for them? Well, you can't force kids. What's coming to my mind is when my daughter was about 8, I signed her up. I thought she had some athletic interests. I signed her up for a basketball camp. And she went once, and she never went back, and she just, there's nothing I could do. Not that I forced her, but she had absolutely no interest in that. And we do have to read our kids' interests and try to find what their interests are. And I think parents have to be very careful not to be reliving their own childhood too, and think, oh, this was important to me, and so I want it to be important for my child. You've got to read your child and see where they will flourish. I do think they need to find something that engages them, and just trying different stuff, trying out different activities. But I think you're on the money that forcing kids into things isn't going to work. Yeah.
How often do you have to deal with helicopter parents?
What? I'm sorry?
How often do you have to deal
How often do I have to deal with helicopter parents? Well, I'm no longer chair of my department, so not as much as I used to. But it's something we do see at UVA, and where parents just get way too involved in their students' lives. One place we see it is when you're accepted at UVA, you have an orientation meeting. And one of the things you do there is you see an advisor and you register for your courses. Pretty simple, except we have a rule that you do it with your advisor, no parents in the room. And boy, do the parents hate that. They've been used to sort of looking over your shoulder all through high school and say, what do you mean I can't be in the room? Say, well, this is college, they're on their own. So that case I talked about in the book was rather extreme, and so we don't see that too often. Yeah.
Earlier you related optimistic thinking to basically have a better outlook on what it could be. Would you relate that to dreaming in any way?
Interesting. It's interesting you brought that up because there's not much research on it. It's something I've become interested as a research question myself is to, we are all very active dreamers and fantasizers. We spend a lot of our time thinking about what might be or what could be, and there's not a lot of research on the role of that. My hunch is that if it takes the form of that best possible self-exercise I mentioned, where what we're dreaming about is something that we can accomplish in the future and work for, that's a good thing. But if our dream is, we wish we had a jetpack and could fly around the world, I'm not sure that, I don't know, maybe you can invent a jetpack and fly around the world. That's probably not the most useful fantasy. Yeah.
How do you find support for the minimal sufficiency principle if it's based on a case-by-case scenario kind of thing?
Okay, another good question. So this minimal sufficiency principle is something that I talk about in the chapter on parenting. And the idea there is that all parents use rewards and punishments. We reward our kids for doing what we want them to do, and we punish them for doing things we don't want them to do. And that can be an effective childbearing technique, but they can be taken way too far. And what this principle says is the best thing to do as a parent is to use them lightly, just strong enough that people do what they want, but not so strong that they feel controlled by you. And we want our kids to internalize and want to do these things themselves. So your question is, well, I think maybe two parts to it. One is, how do we know this exists? There are some controlled experiments that have looked at this very carefully. But is your question more applying it in a particular case?
Right. If you're going to apply it and say you err on the side of too minimal,
Yeah.
how do you really go about judging if it's just something that comes up like in the classroom or a teacher? How do you judge what really is sufficient?
Yeah, no, it's hard. And I think it's hard for teachers, it's hard for parents. One problem for teachers, I think, is that what works for one kid isn't going to work for another, so it's hard to do this even-handedly. But for a parent, I think we just have to read our kids and sort of figure out So, if you want your kid to take piano lessons, but they don't want to, so you try a little reward, and you can get to the point where it's too controlling. You just need to move on to something else. But I think you just have to judge, try it and see. And I think, as I say in the book, I think erring on the too much side to start with is probably better than erring on the too little side. Because on the too much side, at least you'll get the behavior you want. It may not get internalized, but at least kids will be doing what you want them to do. Believe me, I struggle with this with my kids and finding just that right amount of rewards. Yeah?
In the baby Einstein study, he found that parents have a great influence on their kids, like even more so than the video. In today's society, especially, I know parents tend to blame society for like their kids' failures. How much influence do you think that parent has on their kids, on teens especially?
You guys are asking great questions. So it was, one influence the parents really have. And there's been a debate about this in psychology, and the pendulum goes back and forth. At one extreme, a few years ago, there was an article where this woman psychologist wrote that parents make hardly any difference. That as long as we're not abusing our kids, parents don't matter. It's what matters is their peers and what they're born with. Well, that's way too extreme. I'm in the camp that parents do matter. And I think there's more and more research that supports this. And the example you point to of teaching language ability, I think is a good one. That there's studies on that simply count the number of words that parents say to their kids when the kids are toddlers. And it varies a lot from family to family. Some parents talk to their kids a lot more than others. And the more you talk to a kid, the faster he or she will learn to talk, and the bigger vocabulary he or she will have. And so even something as simple as that is just verbalizing and talking is hugely important. And from there on up, so I'm in the parents matter camp. Yeah?
You talk a lot about the best possible self and best possible scenario. A lot of us, pretty much every day, we all think of kind of looking on the bright side, which is in a sense imagining the worst possible scenario. Do you think that kind of thinking is detrimental or unhealthy when it comes to growth?
Interesting. I think it's unavoidable at times to worry and imagine the worst. And there's a hint of evidence that it can be motivating to do so. So, if I have a big test coming up, if I think, if I fail it, big deal, there'll be another test. I'm probably not going to study as hard as if I think, oh my God, the world will end if I do poorly on that test. So I think there is a certain functionality to it, but it certainly can be taken too far. If we become paralyzed with worry, so then we can't study at all, then that's not so good either. So I think a little dose of focusing on the positive, but boy, that'll be really bad if it happens, is probably not so bad. Yeah, first year then you. I'm sorry? Has the book benefited me? Well, I like to think so. You'd have to ask my kids about the parenting part, but they're now grown, so they probably will give you an honest answer. I've tried some of the writing exercises, for example. I think we don't always practice what we preach, but I think I have to some extent. Yeah.
So what do you think would be a solution for students who don't have that positive role model, and but they go to the group that in your book would benefit them, but it doesn't work? Like, what would you suggest them to do?
Well, which groups are you referring to here? If they go to like school groups, you mean, or?
Yeah, because you said like it'll better be for them to be one-on-one, or go to a group just to have a positive role model.
Yeah. Well, I think finding a mentor is important, and it's not always easy. And if it's not a parent, if it's another family member or a teacher, I think that's really important. And if one group doesn't work, then joining another one. Just being persistent is I think, a good message there. Yeah.
Earlier, you spoke of a man who, that you know personally that tried very hard to be a great football player. And you said that, he tried really hard, he did, the extra work to spoke up. But, he did, see no wrong with what he was trying to do. And so he did find, success in what he was doing. But who would you say was his, I don't say problem with life, who would you say was his reason for not reaching his overall goal, having the service?
Well, I think he did succeed in a way. Now, it's true he didn't play football beyond college, but I think he knew in his heart of hearts that wasn't going to happen. I mean, to be able to play sports at that level, that is, extremely small percentage of the population that'll ever get that far. And what I like about that story is that, first of all, I think the fact that he played college football, to be honest, given his talent level, was a pretty big achievement. So he got further than he would have. But then to translate that interest into something he could do, coaching, was, I think, a brilliant move on his part. That he, because we're not all going to become professional sports players or movie stars or the absolute things that just aren't attainable for all of us. But if we can find our niche and find a way of pursuing our passions in ways that other ways that will fulfill them, such as in his case coaching, I guess I view that as a success story. I'm sorry, say again? Yeah, it was a way to sort of translate that interest into a related activity that he found fulfilling, exactly. I think so. I think so. Yeah?
So what was like your actual purpose of writing the book? Was it a situation that you had to make you write the book, or did you just want to write it?
Well, good question. What made me write the book? It's not something I had to do, but I think these ideas have been kind of percolating around for a number of years, and I've done a little bit of the research myself and read other people's research on these topics, but no one had quite put them together in this way, and so it was a challenge. I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but I really enjoyed doing it, so it was fun. Yeah.
One more question.
I'm sorry? That I think you have to ask these folks.
We're going to give you the answer. Okay, Matt, you want to say it?
Yeah, one quick question, Dr. Wilson. We talk about parents shaping their kids' behaviors. How about kids who grew up in this area who maybe for the past 10 or 20 years have had an economic downturn and heard nothing but negative things from their parents? How can the kids go about redirecting their parents' attitudes?
Interesting. Showing them they're wrong, I think. And again, I think being optimistic yourself, getting involved in your community, becoming active in some way, politically, community service, and just showing that you can do well in school, and that showing them their story, that interpretation's wrong, is the best thing you can do, I think.
I do want to say before Dr. Ramsey closes this event, thank you all for coming from the Danville Regional Foundation, the Kiwanis Club of Danville, Danville Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, and DRF at Averett University. Thank you so much. Books are available at Averett University for $10 at the bookstore. It's a very discounted price. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ramsey, and thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Dr. Wilson. So good to have you with us. And Matt Shaws, who works for the Danville Regional Foundation, he's already told you how to secure a copy of the book. Somebody might want to transfer to UVA after you go to DCC. You can certainly buy it in Charlottesville, and I suspect on Amazon and some of the others. So we encourage you, if you don't have a copy, to obtain a copy of this publication. And I think The questions have just been excellent. Give yourself a round of applause. Fantastic questions. I know Professors Taylor and Vicki Taylor and Dee Drinkard have copies of the book, and a number of others have copies. If you have time, Dr. Wilson is going to be joining us over at the Student Center, which is just across the bridge. And if you want to talk to him in a more informal way, we invite you to join us. I think he's going to be over there at about 12:30. So some of you have classes to go to. Thank you so much.